Wrestling legend Hulk Hogan died last week at the age of 71. The cause of his death was revealed on Thursday. World wrestling icon Hulk Hogan, real name Terry Gene Bollea, died at the age of 71 on July 24th. The Florida Medical Examiner's report confirms that the star died of an acute myocardial infarction or heart attack. According to the same report, Terry Gene Bollea also suffered from chronic lymphocytic leukemia and atrial fibrillation, a heart disorder that causes rapid and irregular heartbeats. On the day of his death, police and emergency services responded to his Clearwater Beach home in the morning. According to U.S. media, including People, which obtained numerous documents, emergency workers tried to resuscitate him for nearly 30 minutes before taking him to the hospital, where he was finally pronounced dead. The wrestling world has been plunged into a somber silence. A silence so profound, so jarring, that it echoed beyond the squared circle and into the hearts of millions across the globe. On July 24, 2025, the unthinkable became reality. Hulk Hogan, the face of an era, the man who once told us to say our prayers and eat our vitamins, took his final breath. At 71 years old, Terry Gene Bollea, the icon known the world over as Hulk Hogan, passed away in his Clearwater Beach home in Florida. His death wasn't just the loss of a wrestling superstar, it was the end of a generation. As news broke, the floodgates of emotion opened. Fans, peers, and legends alike found themselves caught in the rawness of disbelief. For many, Hogan was more than a character. He was a symbol. A living, breathing reminder of childhood Saturdays, of thunderous roars from packed arenas, of triumphs that transcended the scripted lines of professional wrestling. Yet, beneath the charisma, the trademark yellow trunks, and the bandana, there was Terry. Vulnerable, human, and quietly battling ailments that even his mightiest leg drop couldn't fight off. The official report confirmed what many feared. Hulk Hogan died of an acute myocardial infarction, what we commonly call a heart attack. But that wasn't all. According to the medical examiner's statement, Hogan had been living with chronic lymphocytic leukemia, a type of blood cancer, and atrial fibrillation, a heart condition that causes rapid and chaotic electrical signals in the upper chambers of the heart. It was a dangerous cocktail of conditions that had been quietly eating away at the man we thought was indestructible. July 24th started like any other humid morning on the Florida coast. But by mid-morning, sirens pierced the air near Clearwater Beach. Emergency responders rushed to Hogan's residence after a 911 call indicated that the wrestling icon had collapsed. What followed was a desperate, 30-minute attempt to resuscitate him. Chest compressions, defibrillations, medication, everything. Paramedics worked with urgency and hope, knowing exactly whose life they were fighting to save. But even heroes fall. And after nearly half an hour, Terry Gene Bollea was officially pronounced dead at the hospital. There's a cruel irony in how quiet death is, especially when it comes for someone so loud, so vibrant, so larger than life. 1 minute, Hogan was still the immortal face of an industry. The next, he was gone, his final fight waged not in a wrestling ring, but in the solitude of his own home, away from the roaring crowds that had once lifted him to the heavens. The aftermath was immediate and deeply emotional. WWE issued a statement, calling Hogan a true legend whose legacy will forever be etched into the fabric of professional wrestling. But their words, though sincere, felt insufficient. How do you summarize the life of Hulk Hogan in a press release? How do you capture the chaos, the triumph, the controversy, and the inspiration? Across social media, wrestlers from all generations shared their grief. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson posted an emotional video, barely able to hold back tears as he spoke of the man who inspired his own journey into wrestling. "He gave me his time when I was a nobody," The Rock said. "He didn't have to, but he did." That's who Terry was. Ric Flair, a contemporary and occasional rival, simply wrote, "We had our battles. In the ring and out. But damn it, I love that man. Rest easy, Hulkster." Triple H, now a major executive in WWE, recalled Hogan's last backstage appearance. He still had that glow. That magic. He shook every hand, took every photo, told the same stories, and we all still laughed like it was the first time. Fans began gathering near Hogan's home, leaving flowers, action figures, and old wrestling memorabilia at the gates. Someone placed a pair of yellow boots and a feathered boa on the grass with a note that read, "Thank you for my childhood." Another fan, visibly emotional, whispered into a nearby camera, "My dad and I used to watch him every week. This feels like losing my father all over again." What made Hogan so universally cherished wasn't just his success, it was how deeply embedded he was in the cultural DNA of the 1980s and 1990s. He was wrestling's ambassador to the mainstream. He turned an industry into a global spectacle. Hulkamania wasn't just a marketing gimmick, it was a movement. And for millions, it was a source of strength. But Hogan's journey was far from simple. Behind the iconic handlebar mustache and over-the-top promos was a man who struggled like anyone else. His public image took several hits over the years. There were lawsuits, leaked tapes, controversies that could have and perhaps should have ended his career. But somehow he survived them all. He always came back. Not without scars, but always with that defiant glint in his eye. That's part of what made him so compelling. Hulk Hogan wasn't just the invincible superhero of our youth. He was a fallen titan who kept rising, who owned his flaws, who kept showing up. Over the years, he spoke more openly about his health. He hinted at the physical toll his body had taken, the back surgeries, the hip replacements, the countless concussions. He often joked about having more metal than bone inside him. And yet, he never stopped attending fan conventions, doing interviews, or filming cameos. Even when the pain was unbearable, even when walking was difficult, he kept going. Because Hulk Hogan was never just wrestling for himself. He was wrestling for the people who still believed. And now, that chapter has closed. The days following his death became a time of national and global mourning. Television networks replayed his greatest matches. Clips of WrestleMania 3, when Hogan body slammed the 520-pound Andre the Giant, went viral again. News anchors who had never covered wrestling were suddenly speaking of the man who defined an era. ESPN ran a special tribute titled The Immortal Falls. Late-night hosts offered tearful monologues, recalling how Hogan shaped their childhoods. But perhaps the most emotional moment came from Hogan's own family. His daughter Brooke Hogan shared a photo of her holding her father's hand in the hospital. The caption was simple, "He held my hand when I was born. I held his when he left." Nick Hogan, his son, remained largely silent but was seen visiting the beach the morning after, alone, wearing one of his father's signature bandanas. WWE quickly announced plans for a televised tribute episode. A Night for the Hulkster was set to air the following Monday Night Raw, promising appearances from past and present superstars. It would be more than just a memorial, it would be a celebration. Because if there's one thing Hulk Hogan would have wanted, it was for the show to go on. Yet, behind the production and tributes, there's a deeper question that lingers. How do we grieve someone who seemed immortal? That's the paradox of Hulk Hogan. He was never just a man. He was a myth. An icon shaped by the roar of the crowd, the blinding lights, the pumped fists of fans around the world. But myths don't die quietly. And even as his physical form fades, the echo of "what you gonna do when Hulkamania runs wild on you" will never leave us. That voice, that presence, that legacy. It's etched into the bones of wrestling history. There are few moments in entertainment when time seems to stand still, when the world pauses, collectively, and feels the weight of loss. The death of Hulk Hogan is one of those moments. It's not just the end of a career. It's the closing of a chapter that defined not just wrestling, but pop culture itself. And for those who grew up on his larger-than-life persona, who believed in the power of good triumphing over evil, who saw him as the beacon of hope in a chaotic world, this loss is personal. Still, there's comfort in memory. In stories. In the timeless footage of him ripping his shirt, cupping his ear to the crowd, pointing defiantly into the camera. That Hulk Hogan will never die. He'll live forever in the hearts of those who chanted his name. In the faces of the children who pretended to be him. In the voices of those who shouted his catchphrases with glee. And in the soul of an industry forever shaped by his legacy. Because no matter what the medical reports say, no matter how quiet the house on Clearwater Beach may be today, Hulkamania lives on. The days that followed Hulk Hogan's passing felt surreal, like the air had been sucked out of the wrestling world. Streets in Clearwater Beach were lined with fans, some locals, some who traveled across states, desperate to pay their respects. They gathered in silence outside Hogan's beachfront property, not for selfies or spectacle, but for mourning. For remembrance. For closure. Some held up old WWF programs, yellowed with age, but still bearing his name on the headline cards. Others brought along vintage action figures, worn from years of play, the paint faded from childhood battles imagined in living rooms and bedrooms. A child clutched a handmade sign that read, "Say your prayers, eat your vitamins, and rest in peace, champ." It was a moment that transcended generations, children grieving alongside parents, grandparents sharing stories of WrestleMania moments with teary-eyed sons. Inside the family home, the mood was equally somber. Sharon, one of Hogan's closest friends from his early days on the wrestling circuit, described the atmosphere as eerily quiet, like the heart of the house had stopped beating. Brooke remained mostly secluded, grieving in private, while close family members took on the difficult task of organizing funeral arrangements and handling the sudden wave of media inquiries. According to sources close to the family, Hogan had been in declining health for months, but kept his conditions largely private. The chronic lymphocytic leukemia had progressed quietly, sapping his strength over time. The atrial fibrillation, too, had grown more severe, causing fainting spells and fatigue. Friends say he didn't want to worry anyone. That's who he was, someone who believed pain was his burden to carry alone. He was stubborn, Ric Flair reportedly told a mutual friend. Always was. He'd say, "I've got this, brother," like he could will his body into obedience. Like he could slam the pain the same way he slammed Andre. In truth, Terry Bollea knew his time was running short. He had started writing letters to old friends in the industry, some handwritten, others dictated and typed. One of those letters, leaked anonymously to the press days after his death, read, "If you're reading this, then I've already gone on to the next show. I just hope the crowd's loud and the lights are bright. I'm sorry if I didn't say goodbye the right way. Truth is, I didn't want you to remember me sick. I wanted you to remember me with that red and yellow energy, running wild and larger than life. I love you all. And I'll be listening from up above, brother. Always." The letter went viral instantly. Wrestlers, fans, and celebrities reposted it, quoting the line, "I'll be listening from up above, brother," like a final catchphrase, a farewell anthem from a man who had given so much to the spotlight. It was raw, honest, human. It reminded everyone that beneath the myth of Hulk Hogan was a man named Terry, one who hurt, who loved, who feared, and who, in the end, was ready. WWE immediately began preparing for a tribute unlike any in its history. Plans were set in motion for a multi-night memorial, beginning with a full episode of Monday Night Raw dedicated to Hogan's life and legacy. Production teams scrambled to assemble montages, sourcing decades of footage, from his early days in the AWA to his rise in WWF, his NWO heel turn in WCW, and finally his triumphant Hall of Fame return. Backstage, the locker room was devastated. Younger talent who had only met Hogan once or twice still felt the sting of loss. His influence on the industry was undeniable. He had paved the way for many of them to live their dreams. One wrestler who had grown up idolizing Hogan was current Intercontinental Champion Austin Theory. In a backstage interview, barely holding it together, he said, "He was the reason I picked up a dumbbell. The reason I ever believed I could main event anything. I met him once, and I'll never forget it." He said, "Keep the energy strong, kid. I've tried to live by that every day since." Roman Reigns posted a short tribute, not through WWE's platforms, but on his own social media account. It was a simple image, Hogan raising Reigns' hand backstage after a WrestleMania several years ago. No caption. No explanation. Just a moment frozen in time between generations, the past giving its blessing to the present. Even CM Punk, known for his fiery criticism of WWE legends and corporate nostalgia, broke character for a rare moment of humility. On Instagram, he posted a black-and-white photo of a young Hulk Hogan standing in a ring with the words, "We didn't always agree. But damn, you made me believe in the magic." As the memorial episode of Raw aired, arenas everywhere went quiet. The lights dimmed. The Titantron flickered. And then his voice. That unmistakable deep, gritty growl, "Well, let me tell you something, brother." The crowd erupted. For 2 straight minutes, they stood, clapping, crying, chanting his name. H-A-G-N. 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 They weren't just watching a video package, they were saying goodbye. They were reliving their own lives through the lens of his career. The tribute video showed his rise, his fame, his battles. The soundtrack featured real audio, clips of fans screaming, of children mimicking his poses, of celebrities calling him the ultimate showman. There were flashes of his time with Mr. T, with Sylvester Stallone, with Cyndi Lauper. Clips of him on The Tonight Show, MTV, and Thunder in Paradise. It was more than just a wrestler's retrospective, it was a cultural time capsule. When the screen faded to black, the crowd stood again. No one moved. No one cheered. Just silence, until his theme song began to play. "I am a real American, fight for the rights of every man." And the tears returned. Because those words weren't just lyrics anymore, they were legacy. That night, every WWE superstar wore black armbands with the initials HH. Commentators spoke in hushed, respectful tones. The ring bell tolled 10 times. And for one night, the competition paused. Rivalries were put aside. Storylines took a back seat. It was all about him. Vince McMahon, who hadn't appeared on WWE television in months, released a rare personal video from his home. In it, he said, "We built this empire together. Without Terry, there is no WWE." He took the torch and ran with it farther than I ever imagined. He was lightning in a bottle, an unstoppable force, a damn superhero. We didn't always see eye to eye, but I loved that man. We all did. Rest easy, Hulkster. And thank you. But perhaps the most powerful tribute came not from the big screen or the company, but from the fans themselves. In cities all over the world, New York, Tokyo, London, Lagos, fans organized impromptu vigils. They lit candles in parks. They held up phones playing classic matches. Some even wore old-school Hulkamania shirts as they gathered in bars, arenas, and parking lots. They shared stories, childhood memories, and personal encounters that defined who Hulk Hogan was to them. One fan in Chicago stood outside a closed wrestling merchandise store with a boombox blasting Real American, holding a sign that read, "Heroes get remembered, but legends never die." That sentiment now echoes across the world. Because in every generation, there are icons who transcend their field, who become something more than what they were. For wrestling, for sports entertainment, for pop culture as a whole, that icon was Hulk Hogan. And though the man is gone, his voice, his spirit, his influence will live on. In the crowd pops when someone hulks up. In the way children still flex in front of the mirror. In every comeback, every redemption arc, every moment where good defeats evil, Hulk Hogan is there. Because immortality doesn't come from titles or trophies. It comes from how deeply you've been etched into the souls of those who watched you, believed in you, and loved you. Terry Bollea may have died from a heart attack, his body weakened by disease and time. But Hulk Hogan? Hulk Hogan can never die. Even in death, Hulk Hogan's presence lingered, etched into every corner of the industry he helped build. As days turned into weeks, the shadow of his passing still hovered over every locker room conversation, every headline in the wrestling press, and every hushed conversation among old-school fans recounting his most legendary matches. His absence was deafening. And not just because of the man he was in the ring, but because of the void he left behind. Clearwater Beach, once a quiet stretch of Florida coastline where Hogan had chosen to live out his final years, now resembled a shrine. Tourists no longer came just for the sun and sand. They came to stand in front of the gates where the Hulkster once walked, to leave tributes and prayers, to feel connected, even if only for a moment, to the spirit of a man who seemed eternal. The city, recognizing the magnitude of his cultural impact, announced plans to erect a statue of Hogan in one of its central parks. This isn't just for wrestling fans, the mayor said during the announcement. This is for anyone who believed in larger-than-life heroes. Meanwhile, WWE continued to honor Hogan in every way they could. At SummerSlam that year, the opening video package did something unthinkable. It broke tradition. Instead of the usual fiery graphics and rock and roll beats, the show opened with a slow, powerful tribute to Hogan. The screen was black and white. The arena went dark. And then, that iconic voice. Let me tell you something, brother. This time, though, it wasn't a roar. It was an echo. A memory. The crowd stood, many with tears in their eyes, as the screen transitioned into a beautiful montage of Hogan's legacy, his first championship win, the moment he slammed Andre, the thunderous ovations, the locker room hugs, and even some quiet backstage moments where the man behind the character smiled without the weight of his persona. That night, every wrestler wore tribute gear, splashing red and yellow into their outfits, taping HH onto their wrists, and dedicating matches to the fallen icon. The commentary team, emotional and restrained, wove Hogan's story into every segment. Not as a gimmick, not as a marketing tool, but as a eulogy shared live before millions. Yet for many in the wrestling business, the grief went deeper than the public tributes. For Vince McMahon, it was personal. Their relationship had been complicated, filled with mutual triumphs and bitter fallouts. But they had built an empire.